Good morning. Our panelists are going to be taking a look at all of the different stages of the play building process, from its generation through to its dialogic conversations with audiences. We're going to start with Mike Metz, who's going to take a look at his role as an artor, term borrowed from Rita Irwin, Alec DeCosin, and Stephanie Springay in relation to the book Artography. And we are labeling it actor, researcher, teacher. After Mike takes a look at his experiences through approximately 6 years of Mira Theater, Nadia Ganesh is going to take a look at her roles as playing a woman of color and how that impacted both her and the role she played from a psychological as well as a dramatic perspective. We added a D for Kevin Hobbs, and the D stands for director. And Kevin is going to take a look at a project that he directed as a DARTOR, director, actor, researcher, teacher. And I'm going to finish up talking about my role as a joker. With that, I'm going to take a look at different techniques we use to have dialogic conversations with our audience members. Just as a quick summary of the genre of applied theater, we're using a form theater type of style. We generate the research through personal and external sources. We research the devising process by translating that information into various dramatic forms, which are meant to be activating scenes that are evocative and encourage conversations with the audience members. So the scenes are constructed with that in mind. And then the research dissemination, it's meant to be participatory, dialogic, and not reaching conclusions, but we would like our audiences leaving haunted. First, we're going to pass it over to Mike.
As someone finishing up my master's program, I've been thinking about the ways in which Mira Theater approaches and dramatizes data. Through my time as an artor, I've spent the last 6 years working on various projects that involve different stakeholders, including students, teachers, guidance counselors, healthcare professionals, and university instructors. With all Mira Theater projects, we begin with collecting and analyzing data such that it can be dramatized into a performance. What I have realized through these projects is that the ways in which we dramatize data and the sources from which data can be pulled vary widely, but have a tendency to complement one another. These styles of dramatizing are the personal, the representational, and the responsive. This presentation will provide a brief overview of these styles using cases from 3 distinct Mira Theater plays. First, I would like to briefly touch a little bit on the devising processes of Mira Theater. Although this does not capture the whole picture, I find that our process can be generally broken down into 3 major phases. The first of these phases is data generation. Where does our data come from, and how does it fit into the context of our project? We can see from this photo that a major part of our process in data generation is dialogic. As a group making a play together, dialogue is a key component in how we generate ideas and learn from one another. Many of these thoughts are then put down on recipe cards that we can see here scattered about the floor so that we can remember them later on. The next phase is vignette creation. As we generate data, we actively think about how this data can be dramatized into a scene. We keep in mind the aesthetics of the scene, in the case of this photo using a shadow screen as an aesthetic motif, while also focusing in on the problems or the questions that the scene poses to the audience. The third phase is our participatory dissemination, or more simply, the performance of the play in a subsequent workshop with an audience, where the audience responds to the questions posed in the scenes and work dialogically to find new meanings and understandings. We can see here how each of these phases, they don't happen in isolation, but are continuous, ongoing processes that often overlap one another and are heavily informed by each other. With this presentation, we're mainly going to be focusing on the middle space between data generation and vignette creation as we look at these styles of dramatizing the data we collect. We'll start with the personal. Personal storytelling is a powerful form of data collection used in all of Mirror Theater's projects. As we approach a new topic, each auteur seeks to understand their own personal meaning with the subject. For example, in many of our projects on healthcare, we think about how the topic of health relates to our own lives, whether it be ourselves, a close family member, or a friend. With personal meaning in storytelling, it has often made me wonder about experience as data. Especially when I was a young undergraduate student, only beginning to be exposed to research, the meaning of data was quite different to me and was related to concepts of concrete statistics and objectivity. However, as I began with my journey with Mirror Theater, and thus my journey into understanding more about qualitative arts-based research, I began to discover how experience is embedded in everything the researcher does. As Marlene Berg notes, quote, "The researcher embraces the importance of experiential knowledge, constantly exploring the interaction among experience, data, and understanding through an iterative process of inquiry in reflection," end quote. In a group methodology such as play building, I would add dialogue to the list of these processes. Indeed, almost every scene is born from experiential knowledge and personal stories. And the power of personal stories is the way in which they evoke other stories. As Joe Norris makes clear, quote, "The stories of others are evocateurs for one's own stories, and the conversations cascade as the participants take turns articulating their similarities and differences. In other words, stories beget stories beget stories." Personal storytelling served as one of the main forms of data generation in our play, You Be the Judge. In collaboration with English as a Second Language services at Brock University, this play focused on issues of academic integrity. What does it mean to plagiarize? Why do students sometimes feel compelled to cheat, even if they know it's wrong? And other pertinent questions. As we delved into devising, personal experience in the stories came from two main sources. The first was an external source, our main contact within ESL services, who would visit our rehearsals, providing us with valuable information as to what types of themes and topics might be useful for their students to explore. As someone who taught ESL, he was able to provide a unique perspective into the topics that Mirror Theater was exploring. The second source was the makeup of Mirror Theater itself, which at the time was mainly undergraduate students. Although the students, myself included, were native English speakers, we still connected with many of the themes that we were discovering in the creation of the play. One of these connections is visible in this scene entitled "Failure is Not an Option."
This applied theater test is going to be so hard. Oh, Kayla. Oh, she's got the answers to the test. But do I take them?
You know, your mother and I do really feel like you need that A.
We expect the best, nothing less.
You shouldn't have gone out last night.
Oh, so irresponsible.
You need to focus.
You need to do better.
Family.
Honor.
Pride.
Integrity.
Income.
Failure is not an option.
But Dad,
No buts. You shouldn't have gone out last night.
but we had to get ready for the dance.
Oh, so you just need to get ready for the dance and then just drop all your other responsibilities.
It was one night.
Yeah, and one night turns into 2 nights, which turns to how long?
I'm still getting my work done. But Mom,
Don't even talk to me right now. You're such a disappointment.
why do you always get mad at me?
Because you're not doing well enough.
I'm trying.
You're not trying hard enough.
I'm doing my best.
I doubt that.
You're right. We shouldn't have sent her to school.
I knew we shouldn't have sent a girl.
So do I take the answers or not?
The theme of pressure, especially from parents, was one that many of the cast members resonated with. In our devising process, we shared personal stories and experiences of parental pressure we all experienced, ranging from disappointment in grades to a lack of trust based on gender, as seen in this video. Failure is not an option, however, does not represent one story or experience, rather a multiplicity of stories, and is polyvocal, representing an inclusion of voice within Mirror Theater. However, the data generation doesn't end in the rehearsal room or when the scene is created. As part of the workshop in a class, data continues to be added. In the case of You Be the Judge, we workshop scenes like Failure is Not an Option with small groups of ESL students. As a collective, students began adding their own stories of parental pressures they experienced. Through the scene, The data was both reinforced in the workshop as well as reinformed by the new perspectives and personal stories. The next style of data that we dramatize is what we refer to as the representational. Here, scenes that come from representational storytelling are those that were analyzed and mediated from pre-existing data, from an external source. Two recent mirror theater plays fell heavily on this style. Stories from the Outside and Inside a Women's Shelter was made in partnership with a local women's shelter in our region and took influence from interviews that were conducted with women who have had experiences at the shelter. Understanding Person-Centered Care, Finding Dignity Within the Shadows, relied on transcripts of focus groups interviews done with families of patients as well as staff members. This, however, will be the subject of Kevin, the director's presentation later on. Our process of analyzing and mediating data started out similarly in both projects. Whereas with issues of academic integrity, we could relay personal stories and experiences, many of us did not have the necessary experiences in shelters and long-term care facilities that could inform this work. Therefore, we turned to interview transcripts and focus groups as our primary source of data collection. During our hours of reading, we would highlight key moments that resonated with us, what Kevin Hobbs referred to as punctum, that which is not necessarily sought out, but comes straight at you and sticks with you beyond the point of the initial reading. After a session of reading, we would come back together in a circle, exchanging these key moments that we had highlighted, specifically those which were brought up and experienced by multiple people. From this point, our data begins to take shape. We write down themes and ideas that are burgeoning and ready to be improvised and devised into a scene. How representational stories are dramatized can be seen in this scene from our play, Stories from the Outside and Inside a Women's Shelter. Here is a scene entitled, Better?
Better? For whom?
From the transcripts we mediated, we noticed how the guests interviewed expressed the ways in which they didn't want to be judged when entering a shelter. This theme resonated with the cast as we discussed the role that a shelter has. We questioned what it means to fix and problematize the ways in which people who have experienced homelessness are told they need to be made better. But as you can see, we question this notion with the line, better for whom? Thus, the representational is that which represents the stories and data that is already out there, ready to be represented through an artistic medium. Whereas the last two styles relied on experiences personally or externally from the past, this style of dramatizing data focuses on aliveness, as mirror theater members have recently delved into creating artistic responses to existing research texts. We refer to this as the responsive. Working in collaboration with Dr. Sheila O'Keefe McCarthy, Mirror Theater came into an ongoing arts integrated project that seeks to, quote, create a place in space to bridge art and science together to revisit and make visible the emotional dimensions of individuals' cardiovascular pain experiences, end quote. Entitled Heartistic Journeys, This project initially began with poems that were created out of interview data of people who had experienced cardiovascular disease. Paintings, some of which can be seen in this slide, were then created by professional artists based on the poetry. Mirror theater then acted as a third layer of this arts integrated journey, and our process has been such that we have responded to the existing research data and art that was provided to us when Dr. O'Keefe McCarthy first began to collaborate. As a group, we began navigating how mirror theater can respond to this already existing data and text. As it is artistic journeys, mirror theater was not the only part of the journey, and thus our process has been to honor and respond to what has already been created while also extending and layering the research. With COVID, we've switched our rehearsals in our performance space to an online format over Zoom. As such, our project on artistic journeys is still in development, nearing the final touches of production. That said, the approach to dramatizing data is responsive to the text that already exists, as each cast member reads the paintings and the poetry differently. And these responses, these live responses to these texts, informs how we then dramatize our scenes. As titled in the beginning of this presentation, I said that these styles of dramatizing the data were complementary to one another. No one style existed in a vacuum. The personal and the representational are embedded into our current work with artistic journeys, just as multiple styles can be located in all of Mirror Theater's projects. With that said, there is no right approach to dramatizing the data. Each style complements the other as they inform each other and add to a more well-rounded, more informed play that is pulling from multiple sources. In many ways, these styles are often put into dialogue with one another in the rehearsal room as we discuss potential similarities and differences between the personal experiences, the representational stories, and the responsive artworks. Thank you, and I will now pass it on to Nadia.
Hi, my name is Nadia Ganesh, and my presentation is on the interplay of psychology and dramatic arts. As both a psychology and dramatic arts student, I bring a dual lens to the play building process by employing both quantitative and qualitative perspectives. I'm currently performing my master's on the psychology of prejudice and discrimination, focusing on intersectionality, but continue to have active ties to the theater community, such as being a board member for both Mirror Theater and a children's theater company called Carousel Players. I consider myself a social justice researcher who uses mixed methods to explore social justice and use the appropriate methods to answer my research questions. Now, it is important to note that I am a woman of color who has experienced sexism, racism, and discrimination. My own lived experiences have made me passionate about researching social justice and inform both my psychology and dramatic arts research. This presentation will highlight some of the experiences that I have had during my 5-year involvement with Mirror Theater, a social issues theater company, providing examples from scene work where the intersections of psychology and theater inform the devising and improvising of vignettes, and how my play building work informs my psychology research. This presentation will also outline multiple case studies that highlight how my work in both fields have positively impacted each other. For example, during the creation of Stories from the Outside and Inside of a Women's Shelter, a production that focuses on the experiences of homeless women, a cast member was given the task to sculpt my body to look as the word strong. However, my fellow cast members perceived the sculpture to appear hostile, defiant, and frightening, as they were unaware of the word that my body was sculpted based on. At the time, I was performing my undergraduate thesis on predictors of stereotyping and bias against Black women. Preparing for my thesis taught me that stereotype endorsement does predict discrimination towards Black women, and also informed me of the angry woman of color stereotype, which portrays women of color, but primarily Black women, as hostile, domineering, irrationally angry, and aggressive. I have also had many discussions in class with my dramatic arts cohort and faculty about our own experiences and feelings that women of color are often given stereotypical roles within mainstream media, and how stereotypes towards marginalized groups can contribute towards their maltreatment in society. Due to all of these experiences, we were able to use the intersection of my race and gender to create a character that appears tough on the outside, but could also be judged as ready to go, and internally feels a balance, allowing us to unpack the stereotype of the angry woman of color in our scenes, and showcase that although a person may look tough or angry on the outside due to our own biases or ways of seeing the world, they may feel very differently internally. Through the application of my psychology work and my own personal experiences that the play building process supports, we're able to create video scenes that invite our audiences to confront their own potential biases involving the intersections of race, gender, and homelessness. Similarly, in Exits and Entrances, a play that explores issues that co-op students may face during their work placements, I played an administrative assistant who was dealing with a rude co-op student. While in character, it crossed my mind that the co-op student's character may be sexist or racist, explaining their rude behavior towards me. However, through my own research, lived experiences, and existing qualitative and quantitative research, I know that women of color, in particular, but people from other marginalized groups as well, are penalized in the workplace if they do not remain calm and collected despite abuse, rudeness, and discrimination. Thus, instead of choosing to have my character raise their voice or become upset, which was my instinct to do, I attempted to remain calm and professional. Thus, when the scene is workshopped, conversations can be formed on why the administrative assistant decided to remain calm and about discrimination and different expectations towards people of color, women of color, and other marginalized groups. I hope in reviewing these scenes, discussions can be formed on the unique issues the marginalized groups experience within the workforce. My background in both fields also assisted in the creation of my character and the scene donations from stories from the outside and inside of a women's shelter. The scene originated from a conversation between cast members on whether it would be beneficial to give money to individuals who are homeless or buy food for them instead. I was able to use this conversation as qualitative research and use the different experiences of my castmates to incorporate many reasons that can resonate with many people on why an individual may not give money to people who are homeless. My psychology background also made me aware that many individuals who are higher in prejudice-prone ideologies justified their discrimination through endorsement of stereotype accuracy. I was able to apply this knowledge to my character and create, hopefully, an authentic character that will resonate with audience members who hold similar stereotypical and prejudiced beliefs about individuals who are homeless. And, by looking into the mirror and seeing themselves within my character, question their biases. In understanding person-centered care, finding dignity within the shadows, I helped develop a scene called the Rowdy Bunch, which I will now play.
Hey, Abby. Hey, sweetheart. How are you? I'm okay, but I was actually wondering if I could talk to you for a minute. Yeah, I can make time. So I was visiting this patient in the TBI ward, and there were these 4 male visitors, and they were being pretty rowdy. So I told them, hey guys, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's only allowed to be 2 visitors per room. But if you guys would like to continue talking, you can go down to the cafe. And then they said,
Yeah, we'll move downstairs. Why don't you join us, huh, sweetheart?
Yeah, you can sit on all of our laps.
Yeah, it's a great deal. 4 for the price of 1 coffee. With that sugar.
So I just kind of stood there. I didn't know what to do. And then after a while, I just walked away and slammed the door.
Bitch!
Hey, Abby. Hey.
As you saw, this scene features a female nurse who confronts men who are breaking hospital policy. The men then sexually harass the female nurse. Regardless of the dark matter of this scene, I was particularly drawn to work on this scene, as I had been involved in psychology literature reviews and work showing that women of color are significantly more likely to be blamed for their harassment and assault compared to white women. As a woman of color, this knowledge has haunted me since I've learned it. By creating the Rowdy Bunch and creating a scene that showcases the experiences of sexual harassment that women of color experience, I was able to explore and come to terms with the feelings of hurt and outrage that resulted from learning this knowledge, and hopefully increase awareness towards women of color's sexual harassment and/or assault. Although I unfortunately needed to be recasted in this scene, as I couldn't attend filming due to personal issues, I was able to create a scene that successfully showcases a disturbing finding and hopefully influences our audience to challenge these injustices. My background in playability also influenced me as a psychology researcher. I believe that the characters in this scene, the Rowdy Bunch, would be higher in something called hostile sexism, an ideology that supports male dominance and exploitation of women by men. When we were given the opportunity to explore, through improvisation, how the woman nurse could regain her power through the help of other women bystanders, we found that no attempts made by a woman bystander could reduce the power of the Rowdy Bunch and allow the nurse to regain her own power. I now believe that a male ally may be needed to neutralize male-female sexual confrontations involving men higher in hostile sexism, and help women regain power in similar situations. A hypothesis I hope to test within my psychology research. Within the last 2 years, Dr. Sheila O'Keefe McCarthy approached Mirror Theater to collaboratively devise a series of vignettes exploring her data on early warning signs of heart disease. I soon learned that women experience different warning signs of heart disease than men, although the male warning signs of heart disease are significantly better known than female warning signs of heart disease. Thus, women who are having heart attacks may not access healthcare services due to their own misconceptions of heart disease and symptoms of heart attacks. Literature also suggests that women experience sexism when accessing healthcare services and face discrimination. People of color are also at greater risk of heart disease and experience discrimination at times when accessing healthcare services. Thus, people of color and women may be apprehensive towards accessing healthcare services due to fear of perceived discrimination. As both a woman and person of color, Mirror Theater was once again able to use my intersectional identity in this scene and explore female symptoms of heart disease and potential implicit and explicit biases that contribute to differences in healthcare treatment. Specifically, I was able to assist in the devising of scenes that explored my character not going to the hospital when experiencing a heart attack, as they believed their symptoms were not that of a heart attack, since they did not match male warning signs of heart disease. When they eventually are taken to a hospital, a doctor tells my character that they are just experiencing anxiety. By utilizing a woman of color in this role, we're able to showcase the unique health disparities between white men, white women, people of color, and women of color. During the past school year, Mirror Theater has also had the opportunity to work with Dr. Val Michelson, an applied health sciences professor at Brock University, who studies the social determinants of health. With Val, we're able to devise a cultural humility workshop designed to increase awareness of implicit bias in healthcare. We presented this workshop to 2 of Val's second-year classes, a recreation and leisure class, and a psychology class throughout the last school year. As a researcher who usually studies explicit prejudice, these workshops were illuminating by showcasing that many healthcare students want to challenge prejudice and discrimination, but may not be aware of their own implicit prejudicial attitudes or how to change them. Many of the workshop participants expressed value in the workshops, showcasing the validity of using applied theater as a method of challenging prejudice and discrimination. We were even able to collect mixed methods data on the effectiveness of using applied theater in implicit bias training in the health sciences, which I will be analyzing during the summer. I was strongly influenced by my work with Artistic Journeys, our implicit bias workshop, and various real-life examples, such as Joyce Echaquan, an Indigenous woman who died after hospital staff tied her to her bed and told her that she was only good for sex. Or Kara Johnson, who was told that she was not a priority by nurses, but later died after bleeding internally in a hospital for over 10 hours. These examples clearly showcase that there is a need for greater research on discrimination against marginalized groups in healthcare, and specifically against women of color. Due to all of these experiences, I decided to perform my current master's research on predictors of discrimination towards women of color in healthcare settings. Particularly, my research focuses on whether women of color, but particularly East Asian or Black women compared to white women, are more discriminated against when accessing healthcare services, and the predictors of their discrimination. I hope my findings can help influence programs and policies and challenge bias and discrimination towards women of color. Additionally, I hope my research will also allow women of color to be more informed about where they may potentially experience discrimination in healthcare settings, the predictors of their discrimination, and thus how they can influence their perceived discrimination tendencies. Overall, I have been extremely fortunate to have learned from so many researchers, such as Dr. Joe Norris, Dr. Sheila O'Keefe McCarthy, Dr. Val Michelson, and Dr. Gordon Hodson, my psychology supervisor. I have been able to learn from and be involved in so many forms of research from multiple disciplines, which informs both my work as a researcher and a person who is passionate about social justice. By working with researchers from so many streams, I have been able to strengthen my abilities as a researcher, activist, and performing artist overall by learning something new from each one. I strongly believe in the power of interdisciplinary research and using different types of methods within the play-building process and also within all forms of research. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Kevin Hobbs, and I am your friendly neighborhood Dartor. I'm here to tell you what I do. So let's get at it. In this presentation, I'll discuss how I, as a director, actor, researcher, and teacher, or Dartor, D-A-R-T-O-R, facilitated a dialogic research process with 11 actors, researchers, and teachers, artors, in order to devise theater vignettes. These vignettes were subsequently turned into an educational video for healthcare workers. This is the video's title and how to access it. I'll add it in the chat. I'd also like to acknowledge the people who were involved in the development of this piece. It's important to note that no Darter works alone. A Darter depends on trust, dialogue, and collaboration. If you take away nothing else from my presentation, take that away. Theater vignettes, or theater scenes, are short evocative scenes that in Mirror Theater's context are created in order to stimulate further discussion. Time-wise, these scenes usually last between 30 seconds and 5 minutes. The image you see right now is from the vignette Packing Memories and is just over 3 minutes long. Vignettes are not verbatim or literal translations of events or of interview transcripts. They are scenes that ask questions of the audience, and we hope inspires audience members to ask their own questions. The dialogues that's generated from these questions is often found in the facilitating or the jokering process, which is what Dr. Joe Norris will be discussing in the next segment. My job as a Dartor is to co-create pieces, activating scenes, as we call them, with cast members, thereby helping Joe, the Joker, by providing him lots of opportunity to engage the audience, providing lots of questions to explore. So, where do I start as a Dartor? Well, you might say the beginning, but I'm going to go just a little bit further back to give you some context. I'm going to start at the pre-beginning, the before times. I came to Mirror Theater at the age of 51. I was working on my master's thesis in social justice and equity at Brock University. At that point, I had a career in theater as an actor, as a playwright, and occasional director. And I was also a medical educator, focusing on communication skills and person-centered care. So very briefly, person-centered care is a philosophy in health sciences that considers the well-being on not only the patient, but family members and healthcare workers. And I have to say, if ever there was a time for bringing person-centered care into the conversation, it's now during a pandemic. Anyway, these two areas or buckets of experience in theater and medical education were important to my master's. This is because I was asked to take part in a research project that examined how family members and healthcare workers achieved person-centered care for people living with dementia and traumatic brain injury. And the research project, which originated in Toronto, Canada's Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre, was using a play-building methodology. Enter Kevin Hobbs. I'm providing this context because it's important for a Dartor to recognize what she, they, he are bringing to this work. It helps in the process. There was another aspect for me as well. Family. I was a son, and in this case, both my parents had dementia. My mother died at the beginning of my master's after years as an Alzheimer's patient, and my father, who had dementia, followed 2 years later at the end of my master's. In other words, I had lots of experience to bring to the work. But experience in no way made me an expert on play building, on person-centered care, or on dementia. My open secret is that I never expect to be an expert on anything. One thing about being a Dartor is that it's critical to always be listening and always be asking questions and not to assume that you are the authority. Be curious, but don't be naive. So the director part of the Dartor does not mean that you're the boss. To me, it means that you synthesize information and help guide, but never command the direction of a scene to arrive at a pre-designated destination. That's not research, in my view. That's control. I strive to make every rehearsal a discovery for myself and also a surprise. And as Joe Norris is well known for saying, I don't know where I'm going, but I know how to get there. So let's get down to brass tacks. How'd you get there? In the case of this project, we started with interview transcripts, interviews with healthcare workers at Sunnybrook, and also with family members who both discussed their struggles when caring for people with dementia or with traumatic brain injury. These interviews had been conducted before I joined the project. There were 4 transcripts, 92 pages in total. In the first 2 rehearsals, I asked each cast member of Mirror Theater, the Artors, to read through 2 of the 4 transcripts. Whenever a moment or an interview or a particular word jumped out at them, I asked them to write it down on a recipe card. I describe these moments as punctum. Now, Mike previously mentioned that word in his section. This word punctum is a word Roland Barthes uses in his book Camera Lucida, in which he describes punctum as the element that is not sought out, but comes at the observer, quote, like an arrow, unquote, causing a wound that lasts beyond the act of observation. I was asking Artors to observe in themselves the wounds that stuck with them. Over 30 cards were produced over the rehearsal period, and I recorded the content of the cards onto a spreadsheet in order to organize the first stage of the research into a single document. I know it's not great, it's not overly visible here, but I think you're going to get at least a sense of what I did. Using this spreadsheet, we were able to review common themes or topics that stood out for multiple cast members. At this point, we could begin putting the devising process on its feet. Some cast members had an affinity for one particular topic and some for another. I divided the Artors into groups and let them explore their topic. I'd visit each group, listen to their approach during the rehearsals, provide feedback or suggestions. I really didn't want to get in the way. What I wanted to do was to guide and provide space for individual and group agency. Each of these groups developed the seed of a vignette. Some groups went further and even had a rudimentary outline of a scene. Near the end of the rehearsal, each group would present its work to the remainder of the cast and feedback would be provided. We also videoed the presentation so that we could remember the scene or the idea. We put those videos on a private Facebook page available for all cast members to review. Rehearsals were weekly and there were 5 in total. During these rehearsals, there would be times I recognized the need for outside information, which was information not found in the transcripts and not generated internally from Artor experiences or ideas. Recognizing this absence of data, I would conduct research through lit reviews, finding my own punctum in the process. I shared my discoveries with the cast. Often it was information that came from medical journals that elaborated on person-centered philosophies or processes in dementia care. This directed us towards greater specificity in the vignettes, or it also added fuel to the creative fire. As well, every week we would sit in a circle and discuss our emerging thoughts about the project. This is critical to the dialogic process. It's messy work. Development of vignettes is not a straight line. Lots of perspectives, lots of approaches. We go forward, we pause, we discuss, rethink things, revisit things. Think of this process as a spiral. This requires patience of the Dartor who may be really eager to get to the end of the rehearsals. Take a breath. I took several, and the final set of vignettes benefited from extended dialogue and re-examinations. It benefited from taking the time. By the end of the 5 rehearsals, we had 20 scenes and a single Saturday videoed all the scenes. So what I'm going to do now is provide you a couple of samples of our work that exemplify how we problem solve certain challenges. Let me show you a vignette called Turntable Etiquette.
Welcome to our facility. Oh, so you're back in my unit, hey?
Hi, how's it going today?
Well, hello there.
In this vignette, we were trying to collapse multiple voices from the interview transcripts into a single scene. Many interviewees talked about meeting a patient for the first time, and they also talked about how do you create a close relationship. We chose to introduce the metaphor of a turnstile as the best way to reflect the comings and goings in a healthcare home, and also to reflect how one needs to continually remind a patient with Alzheimer's that you are a caregiver or a family member. It's ongoing. The next example was a response to representation. How do we express a history of violence in the work environment? We verbalized a story and employed a shadow screen and laser pointers to indicate the vulnerability of caregiver bodies.
He would elbow us in the stomach, in the chest, and the arm, and sometimes even in the face. But now we know to let him try and do it on his own, and if he does need help, we'll step in.
The shadow screen benefited our work in a number of ways. The silhouette could represent people of any age. It also provided emotional distance for the performers portraying abusive characters, as well as Brechtian distance for the audience. And it was an aesthetic motif for the dark and the light states often found in a long-term care facility. Once all the vignettes were videoed and in the can, as they say, the onus was on me as a Dartor to work with the artistic director, Joe Norris, and a video editor in arranging the scenes in a certain order. In other projects, cast members might also take part in this task. In this case, I took the approach that emphasized narrative as a perception of reality, upheld by an underpinning of collected experiences as related through stories. Our stories, or vignettes, were based on common themes that we discovered in the rehearsal process. So I circled back and organized videoed scenes based on themes, not on temporal sequencing or on linear plot points that one typically expects in, say, a movie or a theater play. There was no single hero on a journey. I identified thematic principles of communication, collaboration, recognition of needs/empathy, and job satisfaction. I clustered the vignettes into thematic versions of these individual principles, thereby producing a 32-minute video that is available on an open source web platform, Joe Norris Play Building, as a way of disseminating the research. This is the point in the workshop where I pass the talking stick, or Ali the alligator, to Joe Norris, where he'll discuss facilitation and jokering. This is what Mike called participatory dissemination. Thank you very much.
As was discussed by the other three, Mirror Theater is interested in creating scenes that don't profess or prescribe behaviors onto others. We create scenes that we could work through and look at the complexity of the issues, enabling people to come to their own synthesis for future actions. This work is semi-based on the work of Augusto Boal and Form Theater, and his famous book, Theater of the Oppressed. However, there is a difference. Rather than asking and looking at sources of oppression in others, we asked our audiences to take a look at the scenes and look into the mirror, hence Mirror Theater, and look at how they might use, abuse, and misuse their own power. Misuse is unintentional. As one student said, I didn't realize I was a bully until I saw your play. And abuse is when someone knows they're doing it and does it anyway. So we are, in some ways, we could call theater of the oppressed's or. Here's a good example of Augusto Boal working at Harvard University. And as you can see, as the Joker, he stands between the actors in a very rough stage scenario and the audiences, and facilitates conversations among them, sometimes inviting audience members up on the stage. He calls this the Joker because of the mobility. Augusto talks about different forms of theater, and I think it's important to talk about this just briefly, is the Aristotelian theater, which is most theater, is the fourth wall, the one through which we see, remains intact, and we get a privilege of watching through it. It's Aristotelian, based upon Aristotle, and we can also take a look at the word aristocrat. The actor, the expert, has more power than the audience. Brecht began to question that very nicely and talked about the alienation effect. He wanted to disrupt the drama and give audience members occasions to think. One of the ways that we do it is the t-shirts themselves. So we have semi-costumes, but still the audience is reminded these are artors performing. And then in Form Theater, Augusto Boal calls them spectators. The fourth wall is broken, and with the help of the Joker, actors and audiences move between those two places within the theater or the classroom. So the Joker is the wild card, has more mobility, and sometimes problematically the trickster, not in this way that you want to play a trick on the audience members, but a trickster is always questioning and taking a look at more depth as we delve deeper into the complexity of the situations we examine. Some of the guiding principles is, as I said, we take a look at the oppressor. How do we use, misuse, and abuse our power? It's social constructivist in nature. Through the activating scenes, we provide thesis and antithesis, and the audience members form their own synthesis, and we may all leave with different perspectives. We're not looking for conformity, we're looking for contextualization. It's dialogic because the other aspect is by listening to the performances and by listening to one another, our situations, our beliefs, and our behaviors may change. So it is dialogic in that we recognize all gathered are both teachers and students of one another. So the mirror, by re-examining the scenarios, we re-examine ourselves. One of the things we try to do is, as we move into audience participation, we scaffold and we invite in small stages. Okay, when we're working online, which particular sculpture seems to appeal to you the most? Just put in the number 1 to 6. That way, it's a small stage at first, then we move into conversation, and then eventually, but we don't try to force or bully audiences into participation, but eventually some actually do come up on stage and try the roles themselves. Here's a particular example of what Boal calls voting with feet and image theater, and we use a combination of both. When performed live, we ask the audience members to stand in front of the person they think would suit them as a good team member for a group project in a class. Sometimes when we don't have enough artors available, we show the video and ask them to stand in front of the video. This year, we did not have that luxury of live. So what we did is we actually took a picture and gave the numbers from 1 to 6 and asked them, as I said, to put that into the chat function. So what we did is we scaffold very easy participation, observe, and vote. Then we ask, what is the reason for your choice? And some people were very comfortable in volunteering. What we did find, however, with the online jokering is people were hesitant to volunteer, but were very comfortable if asked. That's something we try not to do live because we don't want to put undue pressure on people to participate. Then what we did is we asked them to, after we had the vote, and let's say most people chose number 3, we asked them to go to Mentimeter and type in a word descriptor. And they could type in up to 6 different words in 6 different blocks. And here's an example of the Mentimeter that was transferred into a Wordle. Then what the Joker does is tries to affirm a couple of the larger ones, but take a look at the outliers. Here's where the conversations and the differences can rest. So here's 2 words, carefree and fearless. We could say, okay, these seem similar in some ways, but different in others. Who chose carefree? Who chose fearless? And could you discuss with each other, what do you think the difference is between those 2? And then we bring other people into the conversation. In live, we also use one called for and against. And here's an example of that particular production where we did get permission from the 2 audience members who volunteered to come up on stage and to try it themselves.
Hey guys, how's it going?
I feel so good about how we did at Sears.
I know, I think we got a really good shot at winning the Sears Festival.
Definitely.
Did you guys see the other group rehearsing though?
Why?
Were they really, really good?
Like better than us?
Like
We
North
should be
High School,
worried.
right?
Yeah.
Like they could beat us? But could they beat us? We have to
It's
win.
possible.
Hey guys,
What?
you know what we could do? We could go sit in the front row and make funny faces at the actors on stage.
Such a good idea. Yeah, like during your
No.
show, be like, well, hello.
Oh, okay. All right, you guys want to do it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pause. Relax. Callie's character, come forward. The rest of you can go sit down first. I noticed your character wasn't as enthusiastic as the others.
No.
No? Why? What's going on?
Well, I mean, no one did that to us. I don't think it's fair that we do that to them. I mean, I have enough faith in our work that we can win even without these tricks and these games. Like, I don't think it's, they may say it's not cheating, but I still don't think it's fair to the other team to do things to them when we had nothing done to us.
Is it cheating? Thoughts? Yes. Adrian.
I'd say yes, it is.
Why do you think it's cheating?
She said the conditions which they got to the competition were undeterred by people in the audience doing the same things to them. So they're trying to, in their own second.
Could I get 2 volunteers from the audience? Very low key. 1. Okay, thanks very much. 1 more. Going once. Okay, thanks very much. Come on. Let you go on either side of Callie. Okay, now what we're going to do is, okay, anyone have a coin at the bar?
Students remember.
Oh, over here, okay. Okay, good. Do you notice what did she give me? I have a witness, so she can't ask for a toonie back. I've had that happen before, so I'm important to get witnesses now, okay? So, your name?
Michael.
Michael, Joe, okay? So, heads or tails? Tails, let's take a look. It is? It's tails, yes. There's a head on the loony, but it's still a tail. There's a tail on the loony too, okay? So, okay, here we go. Here comes the loony back. Thanks very much. Now, what we're going to do is you are going to be able to decide whether you're going to be the voice for Callie to go along with them or against Callie going along with them. You're going to be your inner conscience. So which one of those two would you like to be?
I'll go against Callie.
You're going to be going against. So Adrian, you're going to have to find some ways to be for Callie, actually saying, yes, let's do it. So what's a good and okay, Callie, put your arms out, and you're going to hold her wrist gently, and we're going to put her brain in a little bit of a tug of war. Okay? So with this, can you give us a reason against?
Well, she's gonna probably just get in trouble for...
Okay, you'll get in trouble. Okay? 1 4.
That other school, that's a prep school. They've got so many other advantages. And honestly, just doing something like teasing them is minimal. If they go to a prep school, they get so many other benefits that we don't. They can handle it.
In other words, the dice is already stacked against you for other specific reasons. For and against. I would like you to just hold her arm one way and another and say one of the lines gently. And then Callie, in fact, we don't know how this scene is going to end because you're helping us write the ending of this scene. Callie is going to weigh seriously all of these comments. We're going to restart the scene, and then what we're going to do is see how she's thought through the situation based upon your input. Ready? Play.
If they're really good actors, they won't be bothered by whatever you're doing.
Think about the academic integrity that's going to really happen. Don't listen to Adrian.
They've got so many other advantages than we do to begin with. You need to even play.
But think of how bad you're going to feel. Are you really going to accomplish something? People are nice.
Pause. Freeze, Callie. The voice for and against can go down. The other characters can come back on stage. Take it from the last line. Play.
I think we can do it.
I think think we can do it.
I think we can do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, they have a lot more advantages to us to begin with, but but we should have enough faith in our own work that we can do it without trying to be unfair. Like, we'll feel so much better about ourselves if we win even without these dirty tactics.
Yeah, but it's easier to cheat.
Yeah.
We can win if we cheat. Don't you want to win?
This scene was edited down to about 5 minutes, but it took about 15 to 20 minutes in the actual workshop just to take a look at this one of a number of scenes looking at academic integrity. And again, we like to leave not with a resolution, but taking a look at the problem that we can take forward into our own lives. A couple of others that we've done is looking at out scenes. With a remote control, we can pause a scene and we can go into the future.
Good morning, Joe. Are you hungry this morning?
No.
No? Would you like me to leave it here and maybe you can decide when you're hungry and eat it on your own time?
Hey, Dad. How are they treating you? That looks pretty good. Is that your lunch? It's a little early for lunch, or is that breakfast? Have you not eaten breakfast?
No.
Just haven't eaten it?
No.
Nurse. Could you explain to me why my dad hasn't eaten his breakfast?
Well, we did bring his breakfast in a couple of times, but he didn't seem like he wanted it, so we left it here for him and for him to eat it on his own time.
On his own time?
Yeah.
So you're just letting my dad go without food. When was the last time he ate?
He ate last night.
Last night?
Yeah.
And you didn't think it was important for him to eat this morning?
No, of course not. I just felt if I hovered over him and watched him eat, he'd feel uncomfortable, so I left it here so that he can eat on his own time.
Well, maybe if you did your job better, you would find a different tactic to get him to eat his food.
Well, I'm sorry if I've upset you. Maybe we can come together and talk about ways that we can get your father to eat, and maybe he can join us as well and get his opinion on what he'd prefer.
Yeah, let's talk.
So one of the things we could do is pause it and go to the future. Let's see the conversation. It's not one we perform later that day, a week later, or maybe shortly after. We could ask volunteers to play the healthcare worker or the family member, or we could break the audience up in groups of two. And we've done that from time to time with other scenes and have them role play it and have a couple of groups come and present and analyze it that way. We can also go to the past.
At least tell me, when is he going to be able to see the physiotherapist? I need to know when he's going to be able to walk again.
I never had time to adequately talk to Mr. Jones' family. They took him to another institution before we had the opportunity to talk things through. We never had a time to reconcile or to bring things to closure. I still think I could have done something differently. I'm still haunted by it. So these were based on transcripts of focus groups, and this was an issue that came up. And some people thought that maybe there was a selling feature or promotional aspect to a hospital, that people came in with higher expectations than what could be delivered. So we could go back in time and say, would be a good conversation between someone representing the hospital and the care facility and a family member and what they were expecting. And we found many times there were conflicting expectations about what was going to happen. At the same time, as I said, these scenes, we're not looking for resolution. but we would like to leave our audiences haunted. We try to avoid catharsis and problematize it so they can bring it back to their own lives. Now we're going to move to our own conversations and discussions. Stop the tape and now go live. Looking forward to it.